what's going on.
So where do things really stand? I want to discuss with my panel. Joining me right now are Martha Gimbel, Executive Director of the Budget Lab, Mark Hamrick, a Senior Economic Analyst and Washington Bureau Chief of Bankrate, and Heath Herzog, Consumer Spending Analyst. Good to see you all. Welcome back. Martha, let's begin with you. Who's right here, the president or the consumers? He says it's good.
Politicians don't usually do particularly well saying to consumers, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? It is the case that inflation has been slowing down, but it's still really elevated. The labor market is not as strong as it used to be. And also people are still facing elevated prices from a few years ago. And so telling people, no, definitely the economy is fine, it's kind of hard to fight back against what people are experiencing day to day.
But Mark, Trump, he's pretty repetitious about all this. He repeated his claim there that he inherited an economic disaster from Joe Biden. And for context, inflation was at 3% when Trump took office and is now only slightly lower. So how much patience is needed if the administration, is steering the country into what the president calls an economic golden age?
Well, urging patience isn't also going to be a successful strategy. Consumers are very frustrated by the elevated price levels, the result of historically high inflation. So many inconsistencies or lack of adherence to the truth in what the president has been saying, ill-advised at many levels. He's making in some ways the same mistake the Biden administration made during the campaign, and then of course repeated by Kamala Harris, in that your lived experience is not legitimate. And so on the one hand, he says we inherited effectively the worst problem in modern American history, but there's no problem now, suggesting that they're unwilling to do anything to address it. So my sense is that in 2026, affordability is still going to be a key word, and inflation, elevated prices, affordability, along with the potential for at least elevated unemployment, are going to be key concerns for inflation, or rather for consumers and voters.
Heath, a key survey from the University of Michigan on Friday showed a small but notable uptick in consumer sentiment. Do you expect that to change anytime soon?
Fred, sure, consumer sentiment can be up, but I can also tell you what is coming down very fast, and that's the savings rate here in the United States. It's at about 4.7%. On average, long-term, the U.S. consumer was savings at a rate of 8.4. So when you have a rate that is coming down when it comes to savings, that means the consumer is not okay. In addition to the fact, I also look at credit card delinquencies. We are at almost 13% when it comes to credit card delinquencies, 90-day delinquencies, right? In lower income zip codes, that goes up to 20%. So the math ain't mathin' here. I mean, it is just not matching up here. And so we are certainly seeing a consumer. They may feel like the consumer sentiment is okay, but when you look at the numbers overall, they are.
Martha, the wage gain, it's barely keeping pace with inflation, which contributes to the affordability crisis, that we're seeing. How long will it take for paychecks to catch up with the cost of living? I mean, what's going to make that happen, really?
One super quick thing on consumer sentiment, it did go up, but it's still about 30% down from December of last year. So this is not good. On the question, yes, wages are beating inflation, and we should be clear about that, right? That is good news for everyone. But it will take time for people to kind of earn back to where they were. And also, I come back to this, point that you earn a wage increase, but price increases feel like there's something that's happening to you. And it just feels very unfair to people when they're working really hard to get that raise, and then they go to the grocery store, they get the new bill from their daycare, and it's all eaten up. So it's really hard to feel like you're just keeping your head above water.
Mark, Trump, promised an economic boom. But inflation has stayed high. After his tariffs hit, the job market was sharply weakened, the economy losing jobs in 3 of the past 6 months. So what is the solution here? Lowering costs or boosting jobs?
Well, obviously it would be some of all of the above. The question is, how many levers does the administration have to pull in that? And the easiest solution would be to wake up tomorrow and say no more tariffs, because we look at what has occurred during 2025, and let's talk about perhaps three major policy movements. Number one, tariffs, taxes on imports. Number two, passage of the tax bill. And thirdly, the government shutdown. So two of those are self-inflicted wounds. The third will lend some tailwinds to the economy in early 2026, but also at a cost with respect to long-term debt that will subtract to growth in the long term.
All right, stick around, everybody. My panel will be back for more of your money questions answered right after this. Continuing our conversation on the economy and solutions for you with Martha, Mark, and Heatha. All right, I'd like to specifically discuss now the Affordable Care Act. Congressional Republicans sent lawmakers home for the holidays without resolving the Obamacare subsidies cliff facing millions of Americans on New Year's Day. So the move infuriated some of their own rank and file. Martha, you first. What are the consequences this inaction might have on federal spending, particularly in funding health care for millions?
I mean, spending money on the subsidies would mean that the government has to spend more money. On the other hand, one of the things that this is going to do is raise insurance prices for everyone else who's on the exchanges. Because without those subsidies, some people are going to start thinking about dropping healthcare. It's just going to become too expensive for them. And then you end up in a classic spiral. The people for whom health insurance, they're the healthiest, they don't need it as much, they'll drop it, the sickest remain, that drives prices up, and we go from there. So, this is not a good outlook for health insurance markets and for anyone who needs to buy health insurance over the next year.
All right. And Mark, I mean, what are your thoughts on how Americans facing increased costs for health care, can save in other sectors of their budget or even be able to afford continuing their health care?
Well, we're talking about people who are likely facing, financial challenges in the first place. That's why they're on the exchanges very often. You lump that in with the pending cuts to Medicaid, and I don't think these problems are immediately or easily resolvable by the average household. We think about sort of the three legs of the unaffordability stool right now: higher education, housing, and healthcare. And so we can talk all day long about inflation, hopefully getting back to the Fed's 2% target, which isn't expected to happen until perhaps 2 or 3 years from now. But we have these other factors that really knock people for a loop and really can be financially devastating, leaving aside the fact that if they're facing a health crisis, they may not have care or they may be inflicted with severe financial challenges.
Yeah. Heatha, what do you anticipate in terms of the kind of decisions that families are, and individuals are going to have to make because healthcare costs have gone up and, they need their health coverage, but they also have other needs?
And we're not even talking about the fact that childcare is also incredibly expensive. And if you compare that to wages, so wages have gone up 38%-ish overall, but with childcare, the rising cost of childcare, that's up 40%. Now compare that to the lowest level of the silver plan on the healthcare exchange, right? That itself went up 40%. So overall, the American consumer, if you are dealing with childcare costs, you are having to make a very difficult decision. Are you going to pay for childcare? Are you going to pay for your own healthcare? Are you going to pay for your children's healthcare? Or are you going to cut back on some of those groceries? Again, it's a very difficult decision. And we're not even talking about the rising costs of rent or mortgage payments. It's just, to cut back, you would have to just take a cut out of something that is, obviously a need for the American consumer.
President Donald Trump, announcing this week that nearly 1.5 million military service members will receive checks for $1,776 before Christmas. Money he says the government collected through the tariffs. Listen.
1,450,000 military service members will receive a special, we call warrior dividend before Christmas, a warrior dividend. In honor of our nation's founding in 1776, we are sending every soldier $1,776. Think of that. And the checks are already on the way.
All right, so Martha, how do you see this playing out? Where is this money coming from?
So this money was actually passed as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's not coming from tariffs. I should say at this point, I believe the president is up to 10 things that he said he's going to pay for with tariffs. So just seems to be using tariff revenue for everything, which again, Congress has to appropriate money. This will be helpful to those families. I do want to, in general, encourage politicians not to immediately default to checks as a way to address inflationary concerns. We've seen this before. And when you're just writing checks, it actually tends to drive prices higher. So you provide some short-term relief, but then in the long run, it just makes the problem worse. It's very tempting, but it is actually not helpful.
And Heath, to Martha's point, can the president just decide how revenue from tariffs is going to get spent?
Yeah, no, they need congressional approval there. And, our military personnel deserve all of our support. I mean, they work so hard. There is a lot of gratitude towards them. But when it comes, to Martha's point, it's not going to be covered by tariffs. And I want to point out something, too. Just in Pennsylvania alone, I think the tariffs that people have paid, small businesses, it runs around $5.2 billion. And that's almost up half that it was in 2024. So these small businesses are the ones that are also getting hit from these tariffs, in addition to the fact that we don't know where that revenue is going to go. So we also have to take into consideration how that's impacting small businesses in these states.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We've got more to talk about. The economic panel is back with me. Let's discuss Gen Z and their outlook on the economy. CNN recently spoke with young conservatives attending America Fest, Turning Point USA's annual gathering, and the outlook was pretty unsettling. Many said that they were not optimistic or able to wait for policy changes to improve their financial futures. Home ownership, in fact, was a big concern, and that reflects data from the National Association of Realtors, which found the median age of first-time home buyers now is hitting 40. That's the highest it's ever been. So, Mark, are the odds stacked against Gen Z when it comes to the economy? Are they giving up prematurely?
No.
I'm hearing you.
Oh, Mark can't hear me. Okay, Heath, you say no. Can no one hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
So, Martha, you asked, you answer that question then. What up with these, Gen Z folks? I mean, are they kind of giving up on the whole idea of home ownership? I mean, what's happening?
I mean, what people are feeling is real, right? Housing affordability for first-time homebuyers is the worst that it has been since the 1980s.
Yeah.
So what people are feeling, the stretch that people are feeling, the sense that it is really hard right now is absolutely real. I do want to say two things. One, I do really want people to keep in mind that, over time, living standards have gone up. My life is so much better than my mother's, which is so much better than my grandmother's life. I'm really hopeful my daughter's life will be better. The other thing I do want to remind people is that we have actually been here before as a country. Affordability in the late 1970s, early 1980s was not good, and we got out of it. And so, I want to say to people, yes, it is really hard right now, but I do want to encourage people that we've gotten out of this before and to keep having hope that we'll get there in the future.
Okay, well, a lot still remain hopeful, but then they're looking at their bank accounts and they're spending every dime that they make. And so the idea of saving for that down payment for that first home or whatever else seems like a pipe dream. So is there advice to some of these, Gen Z folks who are like, I want the American dream, but right now I can't do it. So instead, what's the replacement, I guess, or what's the new American dream for many of them if home ownership seems out of reach?
I don't think that we should say that we should be giving up on home ownership as an important part of the American dream. I do think that we really need to make sure that we are making the policy changes that we need to bring housing affordability back. We have not had enough home construction in this country. I should say one thing that is not going to make housing affordability better is current immigration policy. The construction industry is very reliant on immigrants. And so, deporting people, making people scared to go to work, that is not going to help us build the homes that we need so that everyone can afford the American dream.
Okay, and I understand that Mark can hear me now. Mark, so let's talk about this recent, poll from the Harvard Kennedy Institute of Politics, finding that adults under the age of 30 are 3 times more likely to believe artificial intelligence will take opportunities away from them. And if many feel there is an apparent, stereotype that Gen Z is, lazy or less hardworking than their peers, how are they expected to get ahead professionally? I mean, that's their fear, that a lot of people interpret them that way.
I would say, first of all, Frederica, if you're afraid the robots are going to take over, learn how to be a robot overlord. You need to lean into the skills of tomorrow. And there may be some negative impact with respect to AI, and there's some recent research to indicate that's happening already, particularly with younger or entry-level workers. But if you can help to build the AI of the future, use those tools in the workplace in whatever enterprise where you are employed, you will be winning. And so I don't think we need to be pessimistic about this, but we need to be aware of the risks.
Okay, in 30 seconds or less, Heath, because I understand you can hear me, what's your advice? How do you restore the hope or, I guess some inspiration to some of these Gen Zers who are a little concerned about the future?
Listen, I'm hopeful for them. I think they're very pragmatic. It's a very pragmatic generation. They understand that home ownership may not be for everyone. Same thing with higher education. They are heavily reliant on cash. They're skeptical of credit cards, but they can really pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And, according to an Afterpay study, 38% of them don't have $800 in emergency savings, but that's not going to deter them from moving forward and being pragmatic about how they're making their money, how they're going to spend their money, and how they're going to save their money.
All right, Heath, Mark, Martha, thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. Hopefully people feel a little bit more encouraged about the days ahead economically. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Frederica Whitfield. The CNN Newsroom continues with Eric.